have to know what it means. In New York City, rent is expressed rent per square foot per year. So if you hear someone say $60 per square foot, and they take 10,000 square feet, what's their annual rent?
$6 million.
No.
600,000.
Yes. So it'd be $600,000 a year.
You killed it.
That's all right. You know, everyone sort of gets it
taken
wrong.
a math in a while.
Well, everyone sort of gets it wrong, especially when they answer quickly, especially with the zeros. But what goes into that rent? What goes into that number? How do you get to that number? There are 4 components. There are 4 major components that constitute rent. The first is operating expenses. You know, you need to do that. You can take a picture of this when you're done. Operating expenses, who knows what that is?
Electricity.
Right, what it costs to run a building. The guys who work downstairs, maintaining the elevators, fuel, that kind of stuff. And typically in an office building, that number will run about $15 a foot. The landlord has to pay those costs. So out of the 60, how much is he really clearing?
45.
Right. The second cost that you need to know about is called real estate taxes. What's that? Does anyone know? Real estate taxes are what every property owner has to pay to the city of New York so that we can have our streets cleaned, police, firemen, schools. Buildings get assessed and you pay taxes on that assessment and you just can't get around it. So in a typical office building, taxes might be, let's call it $17 a foot. So now we have $32 a foot of costs. So how much are we clearing? Only $28 a foot. Now there's a third cost, and this is almost always the biggest. Does anyone want to take a stab at what that might be?
Debt service?
Right, debt service. Debt service is what it costs to serve your mortgage. If you borrowed money to buy the building or to build the building, you got to pay that back. So if you bought a building for $600 a foot and you put in 100, that means you've got to go out and borrow $500 per square foot. If your interest rate is 5% and it's an interest-only mortgage, what's your annual debt service?
$25 a foot.
Right, $25 a foot. Now how much are we left with? $3 a foot. So,
I thought there were 4 components.
what do you think the fourth component is?
Brokerage fee.
No, that's part of it, leasing things up. Profit. And if the lease isn't profitable because the rent was 50, there'd be a loss. The lower this cost is, the greater the profit will be. The higher the rent is, the greater the profit will be.
So are the first 2 fairly constant?
These are harder to change. You can change them around the margins. Much harder to change the real estate taxes because the taxes are derived from the building's, income and expense. The operating expenses, you can maybe trim that down to $13 a foot, but you shouldn't look for big savings there. The debt service is one area. I just said 5%. Well, what if someone refinances his mortgage at 4%? If he refinances his mortgage at 4%, he's borrowed $500 a foot. What's his debt service? 20. And what's his profit now? Right. So that's why real estate is so interest rate sensitive. When interest rates go up, What stocks go down? REITs. Because people who own real estate are largely dependent on borrowing money. So this is the fundamental, the building block of how we look at real estate. Everything is derivative off the income that a building will throw off. That's how you determine value. That's how you judge, should I build, should I buy, what's the right price? As a tenant, when you're negotiating with a landlord, you should know how much debt he has in the building. You should know what their real estate taxes are, what their operating expenses are. Why? The more knowledge you have of your counterparty, the more effective you can be in a negotiation. Any questions? Cool stuff, huh?